we've got to respect that the parents and the families are the primary educators of children. And that is their role and responsibility. That we at the state need to stick to what is in statute and what we're supposed to be doing with regard to the law. So for example, what is the State Board of Education required by law to do? They are required by law to set standards around things like reading, writing, science, math, and social studies. That is what they're required to do by law. There is no requirement for the State Board of Education to do sex ed standards. And it's important to know that the legislature, twice within the last decade, has specifically declined to make sex education part of the standards the State Board needs to push out regulations on. In fact, in 2013, Senator Ken Haar introduced LB 619 to set sex education standards. That bill went nowhere. And then in 2015, the chair of the Education Committee, Kate Sullivan, organized an interim study around sex education standards and comprehensive sex education. And that went nowhere as well. There was not even a bill introduced because of the feedback the legislature received about sex education standards. So there is no requirement for the State Board of Education to do anything along these lines. They don't have to do this. They can drop this entirely. And that's why I said from the get-go, these sex education standards need to be scrapped. The topics that I mentioned, they're not fixable. This is something that needs to be taught by parents in the home, controversial and non-scientific. We talked about the families in kindergarten. In first grade, they start talking about teaching first graders gender identity. In third grade, they teach sexual orientation and gender expression. Now these are third graders, folks. They're not even close to hitting puberty at this point. And then in fourth grade, they talk about comparing sexual orientation and gender identity. In fifth grade, they talk about gender identity existing along a continuum. In sixth grade, they hit topics such as transsexual, cisgender, transgender, pansexual, two-spirit, non-binary. And one of the things I think it's important to remember, folks, is that kids develop asynchronously. They don't develop at the same rate at the same time. They don't hit puberty at the same time. And we're asking them to take on in these standards, they're asking them to be taking on very complex topics that they don't really necessarily have the understanding to get. And certainly these are things that parents should be teaching. They're not science. The science of biology. Now that is something schools should be talking about. But non-scientific political topics are not what schools should be talking about.